Welcome, and tonight our speaker is Wendy Myers, our senior clinical manager from Cancer Bridges, and she also has her own practice called Find Your Balance. Wendy received an undergraduate degree from Indiana University in Pennsylvania in psychology with a minor in marriage and family relations. She then went on to earn her master's degree in social work with a concentration in mental health from the University of Pittsburgh. She's worked as a medical social worker in various Pittsburgh hospitals prior to her current roles, offering support and resources to a variety of patients and family populations, and she has also facilitated various cancer support groups over the past 27 years. She is a senior clinical manager at Cancer Bridges, but she also oversees counseling, support groups, and the grief program. She provides counseling to clients both in person and virtually, and also co-facilitates the general weekly support group, as well as the general metastatic Zoom support group and moving through cancer grief series, which is fabulous. She also provides education and supervision for the clinical graduate school interns. Um, and Wendy has spoken all at various places, some of the cancer related and health related conferences, as well as helps with clinical editing of various articles and books. Most recently, Flat and Happy by Katrin Van Dam for cancer related publications on topics discussing both the needs of survivors and their caregivers. Wendy was also honored to receive the PCN Community Award, PNC, I'm sorry about that, Community Caring Award from Susan G. Komen in Western PA in 2019 at the Race for the Cure. Wendy's passion to help others stems from her personal connection as a caregiver of cancer patients, and she and her spouse cared for their four parents who battled 7 different types of cancer. She lives in Cranberry with her spouse Jeffrey and their 3 sons. So I am thrilled. Wendy and I had talked at length about this topic, and she just has a an unbelievable way to frame things to make life better. I mean, for a better quality of life. So I am going to turn it over to you, Wendy.
Sounds good. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces. So I'm so excited to be here. I love Happy Feet. Jen and I, you know, uh, this is just near and dear to our heart. I mean, she's done an amazing job with this program since our Cancer Caring Center days and now our Cancer Bridges days. And so it is such an honor to be here. And ironically, when she asked me, she said, could you speak, what would you want to speak on? I have this idea. And I started to read this book, out of the blue. I was at Barnes and Nobles picking up books for somebody else. And, I always like to kind of browse what they have out on the table and found this book that I just absolutely loved. And it kind of fit right into the topic. So hopefully you guys, everybody will benefit from me wandering through Barnes and Nobles. So I'm going to share my screen with you all. And all right, can you all see that?
Yes.
Great. All right. So the title of this is Are You Stuck? And this is a topic that I talk a lot in support groups about, and very, very much in my counseling practice, both at Cancer Bridges and in the private practice. Because everybody gets stuck. And certainly those of you that are going through illness get stuck. And so our goal is this evening is to help kind of understand why we're stuck, and then maybe some tools to help you, become unstuck. So I want you, before we, kind of dive into the meat of the presentation, I want you to ponder these questions. I want you really to kind of think about them as we go through the slides. So the first one is, do you truly enjoy time with your family and friends? That most people would say yes to that. But when you're going through so much, in your life, when you have a lot of challenges going on, whether it's illness or other things going on, right? Because cancer does not exist in a vacuum, unfortunately. But do you really enjoy that time with when you're with your family and friends? So that's the first question. The second question is, can you truly be in the present moment? We have a lot of wonderful wellness programs where we work on meditation and Reiki and massage and trying to get you to focus on the present moment. But can you personally, truly be in the present moment? The third question to ponder is, do you know the difference between sympathy and empathy? And any of you that are in my counseling practice or have been in my support groups certainly will know the answer to this. But in terms of what we're going to talk about tonight, being stuck, do you use sympathy and empathy for yourself and others when faced with life's challenges and you feel like you are stuck? Because that's really important. It's one thing to know about sympathy and empathy, but to actually use it for yourself and others is really kind of our goal. Do you consider yourself a resilient person? And so resiliency is really, one of my favorite tools. And I know this group, being Happy Feet, working on both the emotional side and your movement side, hopefully that's what you're fostering or you have fostered throughout this program is how to be resilient. But are you truly that resilient person now? Some people are born with that and some people can develop that. The next one is, how do you manage your grief? Grief, encompasses not just the loss of somebody, it is encompassing many different stages in our life. Grief is defined as any change in a familiar pattern of behavior. And so when anything changes, whether it be a good change in your life or, a not so good change, how do you manage that? Do you talk about it? Do you share your feelings? Or do you, just kind of stuff it down? And the last question I want you to ponder is, do you see cancer as part of your life rather than defining your life? When you think of your cancer journey, if you're in the midst of it, if it's ongoing, if you're, through the end of it and moving forward, how do you view that? Do you view it as part of your life or do you define it, define your life around your cancer? So those are things I want you all to be thinking about as we go through the slides. All right, so first thing, I come from a family of educators, so I like to, I probably channel inside an elementary school teacher at some level, because my sister, one of my sisters was elementary, the other one was a reading specialist. So I like to have a lot of great graphics to kind of, tie all the slides together. And I like to define things. I like to give you some education as we move, through some of this. So when I look at this and we define the word stuck, I came up surprisingly with a lot of definitions, and it wasn't, hard to Google it and find a lot of different things. So we're going to look at this, and the first definition actually is unable to move from a particular position or place, or unable to change a situation. It's a sense of being trapped or unable to progress in a particular area of your life. You could be stuck in your own emotions and feel helpless, dread, and fear. Maybe due to a lack of processing past traumas that you're stuck or wounds, not having an awareness into why things are the way they are. You may struggle with motivation, overthinking something, a low confidence level, and a poor self-worth. Feeling stuck is this overarching sense that you need to do something to move you from the place that you are into the place you'd rather be, but you just can't get there. People describe this as being frozen in place and may even question themselves, their character, and their drive. So there's Pooh Bear, right? He's stuck in that hole. We all have seen that if you've ever watched Winnie the Pooh. And that's kind of how we feel. So I'm sure all of you have at one point in your life, or maybe even now, you're feeling stuck. So one of the things we want to do, right? We want to be able to move forward to living a life with purpose, In other words, becoming unstuck. And it was so neat when I looked up the opposite of unstuck. It actually came up with living with a purpose. And, kind of like I said, it tied totally into what Jen and I have been talking about. So it's amazing how how the world works in your, kind of led in different ways. So one book, this is not the main book that my talk is based on, but it is definitely a book worth reading, is called the book Do Nothing. It's how to break away from overworking, overdoing, and underliving. And as you can see, the picture on it is a picture of a sloth. And this is a neat book. One of, I don't even remember who referred me to this book, but it's important for those of you that know me. I am like the Energizer Bunny, and doing nothing is a really hard thing and a concept for me to think about. But it is, necessary. And especially when you're going through life transitions, it's important to think about productivity. Life goals are geared towards becoming productive as an adult. And so it's hard for us not to be productive. So in other words, when we are raised in a family, typically, we either go on to further education after high school, or we go into a career of some sort, right? But we are seen and kind of encouraged to be productive. This book talks about the work history of the world and then kind of narrows it down to the United States. And in the United States, if we are not seen as being productive, we are seen as being lazy. And that is not true, but that's how we think of things. So if you come into getting older, or you have a challenge in your life with an illness and you cannot be productive any longer, it doesn't really, bode well for your self-worth, like we looked at, earlier. How do you feel about yourself? But this book is really great about focusing on going from being productive to finding a life with purpose. And purpose can be just as fulfilling as being productive. So, how do we transition from focusing on being productive to focusing on a life with purpose? So, a lot of you do a lot of these things here, with a lot of our programs for Cancer Bridges, certainly through this program, through Happy Feet, and through your cancer journey, right? You all have these things that happen with your body and your mind as you go through this. And you've done the best that you can to control what you can, hopefully, through all of this process. You see your doctors regularly. Hopefully, maybe you ask for some physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language. I know that you guys have, some of those sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays with some of those specialties. Certainly the counseling, the support groups, wellness activities, nutrition, you change your diets, you watch what you're eating, exercise, you find ways to relax, hopefully maybe finding hobbies or returning to hobbies that you like. You may even volunteer or go back to your job, spending time with your family and friends. For some of you who have been in some of my groups, we do this really neat value exercise. And so it's important to reassess what you truly value in life, because that does shift naturally as we age and when you have an illness or any other major changes in your life. And how we look at the value exercise is that we look at these cards. I'm just going to read a few to you because we're not going to do this exercise tonight, but it's important to understand what I mean by a value in life. It's looking at what's important in your life as far as your values go, what's very important in your life, and what's not important in your life. And for instance, in the card deck that I usually read 35 of these value words with their definitions. And then I have you have 3 columns of what's important. The second column is very important, third column is not important. And I have you put these words in the columns, and then we look at them and you kind of star the top 3 in the columns. And that way you kind of, start to see what is very important to me. And as we star those top 3 very important things, if you have a limited amount of energy, we want you to put it into those very important things, because that's going to feel like you have a sense of purpose, something to set an intention on, not a goal. Goals sometimes are daunting. That kind of goals equal productivity, right? So we set an intention, and an intention is a softer landing and can be, further correlated with a sense of purpose. So some of these cards look like, and it's funny, the first one, it's always kind of interesting which one pops up first when I pull this deck out. First one is challenge, to take on difficult tasks and problems. There are very few people that have gone through illness that say this to me. A few that really love and are driven and are very productive people. But the definition of it is, to take on difficult tasks and problems. And not everybody wants that, right? Another one might be flexibility to adjust to new circumstances easily. And that kind of correlates with what we're talking about tonight. Adventure, to have new and exciting experiences. Comfort, to have a pleasant and comfortable life. Um, Attractiveness, to be physically attractive. So those are just some of the, words that we have. And if anybody's interested, I have the card deck. I can send it to you. Just cut them out and you can do it yourself. You can, set up your columns and you can go through them yourself. Or if you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to walk you through it. But it's important to really think about what we value. So here's our main book of the night. This is the Star. It's about Stoicism. And when I first thought about this and I saw this book, and the title is actually right up there, Reasons Not to Worry, How to Be Stoic in Chaotic Times. It's by Bridget Delaney, and she is French, actually. And the picture on there is of Marcus Aurelius. And Marcus Aurelius, you'll see that he had a quote here, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. And when I thought of Stoic, I thought of somebody who's kind of, staunch and not very interactive and not very friendly. But that is really not what this is about. And it was kind of ironically, Marcus Aurelius, I don't know if any of you are Gladiator fans, but our family, I have, family of three boys, like Jen said, her and I both have. And my boys love, along with my husband, the movie The Gladiator. And I actually enjoyed it too. And now they came up with a second one. But Marcus Aurelius is the main heroine, the hero of that movie, and truly was a real person back in the Roman times. So this book is actually based on how the Romans and the Greeks managed their life and how they were in such chaotic times. So it's a really neat book. I'm not completely finished with it, believe it or not. I haven't gotten to the end, but I've got enough to get a sense of what I wanted to share with you this evening. So it's a tool for finding not only a sense of purpose, which we just kind of went over, but tranquility. And that's a word I have not really used very often, but I'm going to use it a lot more because I think I think we live in very chaotic times, period, let alone what you're all going through with illness. And I think tranquility is really kind of a nice intention to set, right? So past history can guide us in present day struggles. And my middle son is a history buff. He loves anything that has to do with history. And so this really kind of, struck a chord with me too, where it talked about ancient Greco-Roman philosophy. And this is a quote from the book. Times back then were full of chaos, war, plagues, pestilence, treachery, corruption, anxiety, overindulgence, and fear. People were longing through these difficulties for finding meaning and connection, to feel whole and tranquil, to love and to be loved, to have a harmonious family life, fulfilling and meaningful work, intimate and nourishing friendships, a sense of contributing to your community, belonging to something greater than yourself, a wonder at the natural world, flashes of deep awe, a head full of questions about how it all came to be, and finally coming to terms with letting it go at some point, not of your choosing. Boy, does that sound familiar? So history repeats itself, right? I think we all feel that way about personal lives, maybe about the world right now. So this is kind of a book to be utilized in many different facets. So we're going to dive into Stoicism. So what are the principles of Stoicism? So if it's not just simply being kind of, kind of the tough outer layer, these are some of the things to think about when we think about Stoicism. The first one is acknowledging that you can't control much of what goes on in your life. And this is really a given, right? I think none of us really understand this, but it is indeed true. We see that emotions are the product of how you think about the world. And our emotions really, they do control our thoughts. It's all connected. Our heart's connected to our brain and vice versa. How we think, how we feel, we're all connected. Accepting that bad things are bound to happen to you from time to time, just as they are for everyone else. So everybody goes through bad times. And I know this is hard concept when you're in the midst of your own bad time, because of course we tune into social media, we tune into our TVs, and um, everybody's having a wonderful time, right? And you're thinking, well, where am I, right? That hallmark, moment. I don't have that. And it's important to realize that that's not real. And we will get more to that, as we talk about reality in later slides. Um, Another principle is seeing yourself as a part of a larger whole, not an isolated individual, part of the human race, part of nature. And you all do that so beautifully here at Cancer Bridges, right? You're part of our community, and you're part of your own communities in many ways. So you don't feel isolated. So that's a really important principle we're already using of Stoicism. Think of everything you have as not your own, but simply on loan, that one day will be taken back. And it's true, I know my husband used to always joke around that when him and his dad would have a fight, and he would want to run away, and his dad would always say, well, you take whatever you came into this world with, which was, your birthday suit, is what he would say. So it's kind of funny to think about that, but it is true. When we leave this world, we leave everything behind. So one of the poems up here I really like, I found this quote. It says, a Stoic is someone who transforms fear into prudence, pain into transformation, mistakes into initiation, and desire into undertaking. So that sounds, pretty hopeful. And that's what we need in this world, is some hope. So how did they do this? How did they take those principles? So the first thing they did was actually called the control test. It was their first step. Before taking action was to run through a basic test called the control test, or the dichotomy of control. This allowed them to access what they could control and could not control about a situation, and therefore focusing their attention on areas that they could control. So they asked themselves these three questions. It was kind of like, what do they call those? One of those, the boxes where, I'm not the math major, you all know that about me. But kind of like, if it's this, then that. And so this is kind of our if then that. Should I worry about this? And is it related to my character, who I am, what I value? Is it related to my actions and reactions? And how am I treating others? Is it something that, about how I'm treating somebody that I could change? So if you say yes to any of those things, then it's within your control to change, and you must take action. If it's not, then basically their idea was, then don't worry. It's pointless to worry. It won't, it's not going to change anything. So when we look at those three areas, your character, your actions and reactions, and how you treat others, then we'll be able to determine, can we take action, and what should we do? So there's a human response, though, that goes into this, right? It's not quite that clear cut and simple, because we are human beings. Successful adaptation requires not resisting change or circumstances as they are, and not looking back and mourning what was, but acknowledging that change is part of life, even change that we do not necessarily like. So here's that human response to this, right? When you think about your cancers, specifically, why should I be okay about good things in my life just stopping? The Stoic response would be you may not be happy with those changes, but the change is outside of your control. And what you can control is how you respond to that change. So think about that. I'm going to read that again. Stoic response would be, you may not be happy with those changes in your life right now, but the change is outside of your control. And what you can control is how you respond to that change. So Randy Pausch, some of you may know that name. he was a wonderful professor at Carnegie Mellon University, and he wrote a famous book. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and knew he did not have much time, but loved teaching so much. And he wrote a wonderful book called The Last Lecture. If you've never read it, you should get it. It's a nice, wonderful read. He also, I believe there's a YouTube video of him actually doing the actual lecture. And he wrote in his book, "We cannot change the cards we are dealt, just how we play the hand." And that's so true in life, right? And if you play a lot of games, you know that's so true. A lot of card games. I'm uh, one of his therapists, Michelle Reese, is actually one of my favorite mentors. She's a therapist in Pittsburgh, and she was his therapist with him and his wife. And I'm hoping to, Jen and I have been trying to get her to come speak, and I'm hoping to get her to speak in the next couple months. But she writes a lovely book about illness and grief and grieving, and really practices a lot of these things I'm sharing with you this evening. I think it's important to look at the reality and kind of, how do we move forward? So think about that quote. We cannot change the cards we are dealt, just how we play the hand. So tranquility, that is that wonderful word we're looking for. So Stoics believe in not getting too high or too low. They want you to find a balance, right? And so I always say to people, it's important not to be Susie Sunshine. And what I mean by that is positivity. A lot of you may use that word, a lot of people may say it to you. And not that I'm, want to be negative, because negative Nellies aren't helpful either. But being Susie Sunshine, always being positive, that's hard to sustain. That was almost impossible over time, because we are going to have these big, these bad things happen to us. Bad things happen to good people. But being stuck as a negative Nelly, always being a victim to something, that's not helpful either. So we want to, not have those too highs or too lows. We want to find that balance somewhere in the middle so that we can find joy in life. So the Stoics, they prized rather tranquility, which they named, I got a lot of vocabulary words, and I, increased my vocabulary the last couple months to reading this book. They named ataraxia, I believe it is, meaning a lucid state of robust equanimity, which was freedom from distress and worry. And they also prized eudaimonia, meaning unperturbed or without mental trouble. So I just hopefully added 2 new words to your vocabulary. Maybe you already have those in your vocabulary, but there are 2 definitely to add, right? Because we want to work on being free from distress and worry, which keeps us stuck, and we don't want any mental troubles. So as they looked at those 2 areas, those 2 definitions there, they came up with these 3 areas of focus, which were your character, your actions and reactions, and how you treat others. So we're going to look at those each a little closer. So your character, they define this loosely, and I love how they use the word loosely, having moral and ethical qualities that guide your actions toward the greater good. It encompasses how you treat others, your values, and how you meet tests in life, adversity, challenges, largis, which is, how generous are you in the world, excess, including how you value money, food, or, they actually had booze there. I did not write that. I thought that was kind of funny. Anything that would, or I would assume drugs, alcohol, anything to alter your state, and how you behave out there in the world. That's how they loosely define your character. They then add to that 4 virtues that help you with your character. And I also, over time, when I first started doing presentations many years ago, I used courage and wisdom, which are the first 2 here, always to look at a cancer journey. I know, how do you face a cancer journey? And courage and wisdom is something that, are definitely needed. Courage to, hear all of those test results, courage to be able to, go through, treatment, and to frankly, go forward with your life no matter what happens, with that cancer diagnosis. Wisdom is something you all gain over time. You just become much brighter, much smarter. You know how to advocate for yourselves. And I am always amazed. Our general metastatic support group that myself and Peg Rosenwig facilitate are just, we call them our rock stars, because they are just incredible of how wise they are and how they've learned to advocate for themselves. Self-control is another part of your character, and develop that in, some of your virtues. And justice, kind of how you see the world through judgments and opinions. So those are all kind of elements of your character. So be thinking of those. Actions and reactions. So this is where we talk about not holding on to judgments and opinions that could be harmful to you and others. This is also a very tough part of Stoicism. Tough to do, but helpful in letting go of worry, fear, and anxiety. And, when we think about how many judgments are out there today, and even within, some of the support groups, some people say, they kind of judge them like, well, why did you do that? I would never do that. And you have to watch with judgments and opinions, not that you will, that's a human response. Again, you naturally have those, but you have to be very careful what you do with those, because if you live by those, if you hold on to those, they can really create you to stay stuck, and you can, live with worry, fear, and anxiety. And then we go on to that empathy, which is validating, empowering, rather than the sympathy of feeling a victim. And, that's just really important to develop. Validating some, you're able to see the difficult situation. You can, and this is where we're not Susie Sunshine, right? We're able to say, this is really tough. This is not easy. I know why I'm stuck right now, but I'm going to pivot and I'm going to do some things to try to get unstuck, because I know, life is worth me, finding a sense of purpose in engaging and finding some joy. So you're going to find ways to empower yourself. That's empathy, and others. Where the sympathy is more the victim mode, where you simply say, well, I'm stuck. There's no way to go. This is just so horrible. And then, there is a lot of hopelessness and a lot of dread. So we want to err on the side of empathy. Good communication. This is really important too. So a lot of reactions come from not being a good communicator, or being misheard or misunderstood. So communication isn't simply how I say things to people, how I relate to people. It's also, how do you receive information? Sometimes I think that when I do counseling, couples counseling, family counseling, there's more in those issues with communication if they're not hearing each other, because they have different communication styles. And this is just, 4 basic ones. I do have a survey I do with families and couples, usually, where I look at, they look at 18 different questions, and they say, are you a driver? Which is kind of like, it's my way or the highway. Are you amiable? And that means I'm just going to go along with whatever's said, because I don't like conflict. So I'm never going to speak up, and I hold all that, that stuff inside. Am I expressive? I'm very emotional. I, react very quickly, and I can anger quickly. Or analytical. Do you see things this way or that way? You're not really seeing those middle grounds, right? It's only, you kind of hold on to those judgment periods where it's one way or another. So our goal is to learn how not to react whenever I do a lot of work with people. It's about, how do we respond to one another? Another important piece of that actions and reactions of is knowing your love language. And that's really important. We did one in our staff, actually, and they have them not only for relationships, they have them for work environments, they have them for friendships. And so, getting to know what your love language is, and those around you and your family and friends and colleagues, and it's very helpful in being able to navigate the world and becoming unstuck. So receiving gifts, some people like to receive gifts. Some people like the physical touch. They want to be hugged, or they want to be held. Words of affirmation, they want to be validated. They want to be told what they're doing is right, it's good, it's valuable. acts of service, people that want to have, somebody to help you, take the garbage out, or somebody to help you, make phone calls. So acts of service, for some people, that's where their love language is. And quality of time, that is my love language actually, because I don't have a lot of time. So when I have quality time with people, I really value it. So learn how you communicate and what your love language is. It would be really helpful. And the last one here is how you treat others. So also when I do family counseling, these are three things I always say that a healthy family says to one another. I love you, thank you, and I'm sorry. Those are all words of, treating others with kindness. And I just think that that's really an important thing to do. We forget to do that. Sometimes we really forget to say thank you. Nobody really writes thank you cards anymore. That nobody really, thinks to say I'm sorry. Forgiveness can actually help you become unstuck in and of itself. It's not easy to practice. Sometimes it's easy to hold a grudge. Ironically, I was in at my church this morning and they had youth Sunday. It was kind of crazy as I was thinking, writing this. And the young man, they always have a young a high school senior do the actual, sermon part. And he told the most powerful story of how he was in a car accident with his girlfriend and he was rear-ended and like pretty significant in his car that he worked really hard and he bought it himself. And he told the story of how he got out of the car to make sure, his girlfriend was all right. He was all right. The people in the car that hit him were all right. And he was angry because those people were impaired. I'm not sure what that meant. I could only imagine, perhaps they were drinking or something, but he said the police came, they really didn't do anything. And he was angry. But he said that over time and through going through, I think he went to a youth camp and they, talked about these things, talked about the value of forgiveness. And he was able to forgive, I know these people that he found out did not have much money, that struggled in life. And I just thought that was so powerful for a 17-year-old to realize that, and so hopeful for the world, right? So he learned about how forgiveness is important. So those three things, I love you, thank you, and I'm sorry, important. Before you even do that, right, you have to take time to practice self-love and self-care. You can only be as kind to others as you are to yourself. This does not mean becoming selfish or self-centered or a narcissist. It means that you need to lead, you have to fill up your pitcher regularly so that you can begin to love others. And that means taking self-care and giving yourself self-love. Giving the gift of the present moment to yourself and your family, enjoying life by seeking that sense of purpose, focusing on others. Sometimes whenever you get to that point where you have that self-love and self-care, sometimes taking care of others or focusing on others may cause your thinking to shift a little bit. Finding someone and something to love and focus on is important. Engaging in your community with others in a similar situation, for instance, coming to a cancer support group, or finding new connections. Those are ways to, practice, treating others with kindness and love. So I'm going to read to you. I'm sure you all know this one. It's good to hear it every once in a while. It is one of my favorite things when I think about, the thing of how to treat others with kindness. All I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten by Robert Fulghum. Share everything, play fair, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up your own mess, don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody, wash your hands before you eat, flush, warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life, learn some and think some and draw and paint. And sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out in the world, watch out for traffic. hold hands, and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the styrofoam cup? The roots go down and the plant goes up, and nobody really knows how or why, but we are all like that. Goldfish, hamsters, and white mice, and even the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die, and so do we. Everything you need to know is in there somewhere. And it is still true no matter how old you are when you go out in the world, it is best to hold hands and stick together. So think of that poem when you think about how you should be treating everybody. So finally, last slide, we talk about resiliency. And someday when I get the chance and the time, I'm going to write a book and it's going to be entitled Resiliency, because it is indeed my favorite tool to use. And as I've gotten older, I wish my parents were still alive that I could thank them for giving this to me, because they were truly resilient people. My mom always told me she grew up and her and my dad were next door neighbors growing up, and they always, they kind of grew up in the Depression era. She said, we never knew we were poor. We just, all were in the same kind of boat together, and we always were resilient. And she passed that wonderful value on to my sisters and I. And so I use it in helping others, and I think it's important. So we must face reality. That's part of being resilient. This is the hard part. Nobody likes to talk about the elephant in the room. And this is ironically, the word stuck is in this book a couple of times, in the Stoic book. And this is a quote from it. It says, it unfolds and then we get stuck, especially if we resist it, speaking in terms of reality, and try to bury it or try to move on, not forward. We load it up with judgments. Our powerful subconscious influencing thoughts and actions fuel our memories and triggers. We have desires or want more from the present moments than it is providing. We have reactions, projections, and old sore spots that get triggered. So the elephants in the room, one of my graduate students, she had such a neat session with somebody last week where she brought this up to them. They were talking about it. And this woman said, wow, I have a lot of elephants in the room. She said, do you mind if I actually draw them and we can talk about them next time? So she came back to the session and she said, I drew like big elephants and medium elephants and little elephants. And she actually drew pictures of elephants. And then she stuck the big elephants in the room in the big ones and the medium ones and the little ones so that they could kind of go over, what was actually keeping her stuck in each one of those, those different elephant rooms. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So you might want to do that yourself. So when we face reality with the tools that we kind of talked about earlier, right? We want to look at and move through our grief. So one thing they do talk about in this book is, they don't really address the grief element to it. And because grief is really one of my major wheelhouses, we have to do this. We have changes all the time in familiar patterns of behavior, especially when it comes to illness, right? And so we always have to be talking about those changes and our feelings and our thoughts, not for days, not for hours, but we just have to speak them out loud to connect our heart and our heads. My colleague and I always said in the grief work we do that people try to use their head, their brain, to make sense of things when it comes to grief. And that is the wrong tool for the job for sure. It is your heart. So same thing here. To find resiliency, to move through and become unstuck, you have to talk about feelings in addition to connecting them to your thoughts. So we have to move through that grief. And then we're going to focus on those character, action, and reactions and how you treat others by using those 4 Stoic virtues of courage, wisdom, self-control, and justice by not judging. Ironically, too, the Stoics were known to journal. They journaled daily on their self-reflections of the day about themselves and how they were emotionally in their lives. So they reflected back on those, how was their character? Did they do things out of their character today? Were their actions and reactions, appropriate? And did they treat others that day, the way they would want to be treated? So I love that. I thought that was a really great thing and something you all can practice too, even if you don't write it down, just kind of before you go to sleep at night, reflect a little bit on your day. Seeing your challenges in life as part of your puzzle piece in your life rather than defining your life. This is so important. And even if you have metastatic cancer, right, there are still ways of making this a piece of your puzzle and not defining your life. A couple examples of this is that I have a young man that I'm working with that he's in his 30s and he has a stage 4 aggressive cancer. And it goes in and out of being stable and then not stable. And he did get through schooling, he got a wonderful degree, but he never could practice, really find a job. But he needed a sense of purpose, right? Because he was stuck. And so he was defining his whole life around his cancer. And it was our work together so that he could find that he could move it to just being a piece of the puzzle when he was, in a good place with it and not his whole life. And he has done amazing things. He took one of our drawing classes, and the pictures that he drew, where I said to him, "Did you really draw that?" And it was incredible. He then took a massage class, so he's gonna, hopefully teach, maybe become a massage therapist if he's able to finish it. So he defined cancer became a piece of that puzzle. It didn't define him anymore. And there was such a switch in, how he looked at life and how much joy he could find. The other way I look at this too is knowing one of my clients said to me, "Wendy, I feel like I'm on the train of life and it's chugging along, chugging along." And I stopped when I got my cancer diagnosis. It stopped. And I had to have my treatment and, reflect on it all and plan for it. And then as I started to be stable again and the treatment was completed for that time period, I moved forward in the train again. And I know it's going to stop again. And we talked about this, that when it would stop again, because all of our trains are going to stop. We're all going to reach that final destination, hopefully when we're very old and we have lived a really long, wonderful life. But when it ends, you don't want to look back as a victim and say, "Oh my goodness, I should have been living. I should have found a sense of purpose. I shouldn't have been stuck because I never moved forward. I just stayed where I was." And whenever your end of your life does come, or for your loved ones that you leave behind, knowing how you lived, in that time period is so comforting in their grief work and comforting when you're taking your last breaths in of your life, that you don't have those regrets. And what I'm going to end with is a poem that I've been reading all week long. It's one of my absolute favorite poems. And I'm going to read it to my grief group tomorrow too, because I want them to remember this and to focus on it. And it's called The Dash. I read it the other night. If you were on our Radical Hope, I read it there, and Jen asked me to read it tonight, so I incorporated it into my presentation. And the dash meaning, kind of that what I was just saying about that train, right? It's in between the stops. So the dash is your birth date and the dash between your death date, right? It's what you have on a tombstone. So think of it in terms of that dash is what you're living and what your life is. So the poem goes like this. I read of a man who stood to speak at a funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on earth. And now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. To be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you lived your dash? So I don't know if there was a Stoic person that wrote this, but it certainly speaks to everything that, I kind of went over and everything in this book. And I'm always here if anybody needs a little help, figuring out how to get unstuck. And I appreciate you all. Thank you very much for letting me speak.